is our first destination. There's the eco resort, we're told. Beautiful!
We set sail from Ambon in the early morning. The conditions were absolutely perfect to begin the 250-mile sail to Raja Ampat. We had an epic day of sailing with great, steady winds. We were so pumped to finally be this close. It had been months of planning and sailing, and now we were less than 2 days away. As evening approached, it began to slack off and we found ourselves motoring for a few hours. Well, it's about 1 in the morning and we are north of Saram on the way to Misul. Finally got some wind and they're kind of beating, but it's not actually too bad. We have about 10 knots of breeze finally after motoring for a couple hours. But the strange thing is, I saw some like red and blue flashing lights off in the distance, and I really don't like red and blue flashing lights, so we're running dark and we're running silent. I turned off the EIS and I turned off our navigation lights, and I don't know, it just seemed kind of weird. I don't know if it's like the Indonesian Navy or something out here, but the last thing I want is a visit from anybody like wondering why we're sailing around even though we're not doing anything wrong. Still. But I think all is good. They receded into the horizon, so they are not following us. Maybe I'm paranoid.
It's 3 a.m. So we've had a good steady breeze for the last 2 hours, and we're gonna be in Raja Ampat in like 4 hours. Fucking sweet.
So 5 a.m. on the 21st of August 2013. We are just about in Raja Ampat, so it's pretty exciting. Looking forward to being here for a really long time. Conditions are really good. The wind picked up. We've had a good sail. Check out these beautiful conditions.
It is 6:30 in the morning. It was a full moon. It was really beautiful, but it's disappeared now, and the sun's just starting to come up, which is nice. And I've spotted land, which is pretty cool. It's pretty exciting that we're in Raja Ampat. It still blows my mind. It's still strange that we're here, you know? I don't know. Time needs to slow down. It's moving much too quickly.
Our first island in Raja Ampat loomed on the horizon, and then suddenly we were here. We finally saw those limestone cliffs we read so much about. We had to keep a good lookout because our charts weren't the greatest. Bumping into these jagged, uncharted rocks can ruin your whole day. But that's what makes this such a sweet diving destination. Massive currents are lifted from the ocean depths on these rocky outcroppings and support entire ecosystems of coral and fish. This entire area was one solid landmass on our chart, when in fact, it's actually littered with secret coves and awesome places to explore. We dropped Maggie in the water and sent Brady on a reconnaissance mission to look for our home for the next week. Winding our way through steep cliff faces, we found a perfectly protected hole on the eastern edge of Kalig Island.
The only problem is the water's too deep to anchor normally. It's about 175 feet deep, right up until the cliff face, where it suddenly shallows to 6 feet. Putting out enough anchor chain wasn't an option, so we used a trick I learned sailing back in the steep fjords of British Columbia, Canada. You drop your hook and back towards the cliff face until it catches on something below. Keeping the boat in reverse, you run stern lines and tie off to anything you can. Trees, rocks, whatever you can find. It works great for anchoring in small, deep spots. Peacefully anchored in our own little private paradise, we'd finally arrived in Raja Ampat. Knowing we'd be here for a while, I started preparing a batch to run through the still. The crew was already busy diminishing the supplies with a floaty party.
Rasharamas. Good morning. It's time to go diving in Raja Ampat. Are you awake? Pee the pants.
Time to get up.
It's time to go diving.
Yay.
Karen. Time to go diving. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ready to go diving? Are you excited?
Yeah.
Woohoo! What's the name of the site? Potato wedges. Time to fill dive tanks.
Oh yeah, I want some bread. I would do that.
Having your own compressor in remote locations like this is crucial. We pretty much run a mini dive shop on Delos, with enough tanks, gear, and spare parts for the entire crew to dive for months on end. We were so stoked to be in our first dive, which was only a 10-minute dinghy ride from Delos. The currents here can be vicious, easily running a few knots or more. One wrong move or miscalculation and you'll never make it back to the dinghy. So we dove in teams most of the time, just in case the dive team got swept away and needed rescuing. Once we were down, the reef was spectacular. There was an explosion of life, unlike anything we'd ever seen before on our voyage across the South Pacific. We even spotted manta rays feeding in the currents. These barracuda held stationary in the current, just waiting to snap something up. Some of them were up to 5 feet long with some nasty teeth to match. Every square inch of every surface was taken up by hard and soft corals. After seeing the condition of the Great Barrier Reef over the past year, this was like a breath of fresh air. Over a week, we ended up diving 7 different sites here, all within a few-minute dinghy ride of Delos. It was absolutely spectacular to see such healthy living reefs and fish.
Hello.
Later on in the week, we got a visit from the patrol that's responsible for maintaining this little slice of heaven. The locals have finally realized the ocean is worth more alive than dead. We took advantage of their visit to learn some basic Indonesian and teach them a bit of English. Our new friends told us about a mooring right in front of their camp with a sweet dive spot around the corner. It sounded good to us, so we began removing our spider web of anchors and lines. The wind had picked up, so we dropped a second bow anchor during our stay. We can't use the windlass as normal for our second anchor, so getting it out of the deep water was a massive effort.
That first anchorage was the epitome of Raja Ampat. Just fucking big cliffs, clear water, stern tide right up next to the rocks. Really
Snorkeling right off the back of the boat.
Yeah.
That was perfect. That's what we have been looking for. Like, I feel all the way up, like even from Australia.
Yeah.
I always want to swim up the boat and fucking just
No one around.
yeah,
just,
just be naked all the time.
Crazy night like where they had the luminescence in the water. Bioluminescence?
Yeah.
Around went
Skinny
naked,
dipping?
Skinny dipping and yeah, and then shots.
And now it's time to move on to, what's the island called?
Island? Yeah.
Gillet.
Village? Village?
Yep.
It's meant to be a sweet mooring now.
And hopefully a beach too.
Yeah.
That'll be
White
great.
sandy beach would be nice.
Yeah. And we'll be brewing liquor in the next couple days too.
Oh yeah.
Got our mash ready.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's 25 liters.
Yeah.
There was a mooring as promised, and the beach looked pretty sweet too. It had been about 10 days since our feet were on solid ground, so we wasted no time in stretching our legs. Yasha had a close encounter with a sea snake. These little guys are one of the most poisonous snakes in the world. Luckily, their mouths are pretty small, and normally they can't bite you. We met up with our new friends from the patrol boat, and they showed us their place. All these guys live here in this little hut, right on the beach. There's no alcohol on the island, so they spend a lot of time drinking sweet tea. Seriously, they just sit around smoking cigarettes and drinking tea when not on patrol. They're obviously a pretty tight group. The sweet tea was flowing by the time the rest of the crew arrived to get in on the action. Soon enough, we had us a good bonfire. They don't have much on this island, but strangely enough, they have a strobe light for special occasions. Like when a group of sailors shows up for a sweet tea-fueled dance party. Our patrol friends gave us the location of their favorite dive spot, which is just around the corner of the island. Just like our first dives, it was thick with fish and corals. It was so good, we ended up spending another few days just diving this one rock. With much more to see, we dropped the mooring and headed north towards Tomolo Bay to seek out our next adventure. Up next, the crew gets a paparazzi greeting from pearl farmers. And the Indonesian army and police escort us to a sacred cave. Awesome, like red and blue flashing lights off in the distance, and I really don't like red and blue flashing lights, so we're running dark and we're running silent. I turned off the EIS and I turned off our navigation lights, and I don't know, it just seemed kind of weird. I don't know if it's like the Indonesian Navy or something out here, but the last thing I want is a visit from anybody like wondering why we're... It began to slack off and we found ourselves motoring for a few hours. Well, it's about 1 in the morning and we are north of Seram on the way to Misul. Finally got some wind and they're kind of beating, but it's not actually too bad. We have about 10 knots of breeze finally after motoring for a couple hours. But the strange thing is, the conditions were absolutely perfect to begin the 250-mile sail to Raja Ampat. We had an epic day of sailing with great, steady winds. We were so pumped to finally be this close. It had been months of planning and sailing, and now we were less than 2 days away. As evening approached,
As our first destination, there is an eco-resort, we're told. Beautiful!
we set sail from Ambon in the early morning